Good afternoon. I'm Eric Sampson, a principal with SVA Consulting, and first and foremost, would like to thank you for joining our webinar on remote working. These certainly are surreal times. We put this webinar together as we truly wanted to find a way we could help our clients, the business community at large, and most importantly, their employees. This crisis has placed us in a position of urgent and truly forced innovation, all while trying to implement business continuity plans, whether we had one or not. Within the consulting business at SVA, we were fairly fortunate in that due to our typical activity, most of us were already built to be remote. However, like many of you, we have still had to figure out contingencies related to some of our back office processes and also continue to try to figure out working together while being separated with all the additional distractions related to our current normal. We understand that there aren't many as fortunate as we have been. So today's webinar will cover practical insights, and I underscore practical, around how to work remotely, some of the collaborative technology solutions available, securing your new remote workforce, which is a ever increasing need there, and leading a remote team. With that, I would like to welcome our presenters today, easy for me to say. Leah Rowe is the CEO and a business coach at The Perk, which is a professional training and coaching company focused on organizational culture. The Perk also happens to have a remote work expertise practice, which, as you can imagine, has consumed the business as of late. Additionally, we have Ben Stickney is the Director of IT Services, and Mark Schaefer is the Chief Information Security Officer at SVA Consulting, where as business people that understand technology, we focus on people, process, and technology to help organizations capitalize on opportunities. With that, I will hand it over to Leah to kick us off. Thanks a bunch.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. So, and can everyone hear me okay? Good? Awesome. Wonderful. So hello, everyone. I'm Leah Rowe. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm excited to talk to you all about something that I'm very passionate about, and that is remote work. My background is in building, scaling, and developing remote teams and cultures. And in addition to that, I have been a remote worker now for over 10 years. So in addition to, it's not just something that I'm passionate about or interested in, it's something that I'm actually practicing on a daily basis myself. So I want to talk a little bit about remote work right now and this wave that we're seeing, this big boom of remote work. So to be totally honest, in a normal world, this is not the ideal way in which I would suggest any companies start or scale their remote workforce, but this is the world we're in, so there's not a lot of options. This happened very abruptly. There wasn't a lot of time to plan or strategize. And when I work with organizations to become different forms of remote companies, you know, there's planning involved, there's strategy, there's a lot of work that's done before we actually execute, which we didn't have the luxury of that right now. So a lot of people are working remotely for the very first time ever. A lot of people are working completely remotely for the first time, and that in and of itself is a big change. But then you add in the fact that we're in the middle of a global health crisis, and just the amount of extra anxiety and worry that is around us right now, it's made it really, really hard and really overwhelming for a lot of people. In addition, we're not in a normal work from home situation right now. There's a lot of other distractions that we don't normally have. A big one being that kids are at home, schools are closed, there is no other choice. I don't know if anyone could hear just now, hopefully not, but my 21-month-old was just screaming in the room next to me. So even for those of us who are very remote savvy, have been doing this for years, we are encountering all sorts of new challenges that we're navigating, but that we just haven't had to deal with prior. So another thing is full-time remote only work is not for everyone. There are people who choose specifically not to work at companies where they work remotely because they really thrive on that social, physical connection with their coworkers. So a lot of people right now are being put in a situation that they don't want to be in. So that makes work really hard. And working physically at home is not for everyone. I know tons of people who love to work remotely, but they love to do so not physically at their house. They work at co-working spaces or coffee shops. They like to have that physical separation between work and home, which there's no option for that right now. So we're definitely seeing a lot of challenges, but regardless, the door to remote work has been opened, and a lot of people, individuals and companies are seeing the positives of remote work and also the opportunities. So we've opened the door, we've stepped through it, and I truly believe that there is no going back to exactly how we were working before now. So if there's no going back, then what does the future hold? What does it look like? Do I think all companies are going to become completely remote from here on out? No, I absolutely do not think that. But I do believe that there will be a shift. And I think we will see most companies adopting principles of being remote first. Let me tell you what remote first means. So at a high level, remote first is all about equipping, enabling, and empowering your team to be as productive as possible and to hit their results regardless of where they're located. So the name itself, remote first, is in contrast to physical office first. So a remote first company builds all of its teams, its workflows, its processes, how it communicates, all the tools that you use around the concept of being completely remote, regardless if you're actually remote or not. I love to think of remote first in terms of a spectrum. So at one end of the spectrum, you have all employees have to go into the office. Work can only be done at the office. That's how it is every day. You have not equipped, enabled, or empowered your team to do any sort of work outside of the office. Then at the other end of the spectrum is remote only organization. So all work, absolutely all work is done remotely. There is no physical office space. Remote first is like this happy middle point. So your team and your company has this competitive advantage because you're able to work remotely partial time. You can work remotely all of the time or not, but you have that capability. So when we're in a situation like we're in right now, you can transition to remote only work and have that be effortless. But it does require, as a company, to adopt remote first principles. You have to invest in hardware, software, training, support, all of the things that make remote work possible and super productive. Thank you. So one of the things that I love about remote first work models is it doesn't matter if you're in the office or you're on the road or you're at home, the way in which you work is the exact same. The way that you communicate with your team, the tools that you use, it doesn't matter where you're located. Your work can be done, you can be productive, you can hit your results regardless of location. There's no friction between switching locations. So my experience has actually been working primarily for remote first companies. When I first moved here to Madison, I joined a CPA firm and we were not remote at all. And we became remote first. And the driving factor for why we became remote first at that organization was because at the time we were in a really competitive labor market. We needed to recruit and retain talent and we needed a way to compete. So we found that the best way to do that was to adopt remote first principles and give our employees the opportunity to choose where they are the most productive, where can they hit the results, whether that was in the office or at home or while traveling. That was the way that we could compete in the market. Then after I left that company and I went and worked for another company that was already remote first, and it was here in Madison, and we were a software company. And so I got there and I realized, we actually could be a remote only company. All the work that we were doing could be done completely remotely. So I asked the CEO, I said, why did we decide to become a remote first company as opposed to a remote only company? And he said that he wanted to be inclusive of how everyone worked best because he believed that that's how he would achieve success as a business. And for him, working best meant how do people most enjoy to work and how are they the most productive? How can they hit their results in the best way? So we had employees who came to the office every day because that's where they were the most productive. That's how they could hit their results. We had some employees who never came into the office. They were located outside of the state and they could do their work completely remotely. Then we had a bunch of people in the middle that would come into the office for a few days, then work from home and vice versa. But we were built as a remote first company. So all of that could function wonderfully because you could do your work from absolutely anywhere. So there are a few things then, that's what remote first is, but I want to tell you a few things that are not true about remote first. So when I'm talking about remote first principles and remote first companies, this does not mean that you have to get rid of your offices. You absolutely still have an office if you have a remote first company and culture. It also doesn't mean that you don't have on-site employees. A big part about remote first work is that you're focused on results and productivity. So If the work that needs to be done, if that's where the results are hit, are on site, then those people need to be on site. It does not mean that employees can work from absolutely anywhere. You need to be able to achieve your results. You need to be productive. So some things that you definitely need, you're going to need high-speed internet, regardless of where you're at. You're going to need to be clearly seen and heard. One of the things we'll talk a lot about today is that video is extremely important if you are part of or running a remote team, and you need to be somewhere that's distraction-free. The distraction-free is a little difficult in the current situation we're in, just with kids being at home, but in a normal remote work from home situation, that is definitely something that is needed. I also want to differentiate between remote friendly and remote first. Allowing a person or some people to work from home every now and then is remote friendly. And that is very different from intentionally creating a company and a culture where remote work is embraced and actually works. So you need to be really intentional about the tools that you're using and the company culture that you're building. So that's a little bit about what remote first is. Why do I think companies are going to become remote first or adopt more of these principles? And why have they already done that in the past? So one of the things that I'm seeing and hearing from a lot of companies is a lot of companies are going to start adopting remote first principles in case something like this happens again, in case there's a pandemic or another life situation in which their team has to primarily go completely remote. They want to be prepared for that. Also, companies in the past have chosen to go remote first because you can save money. If not everyone's coming into the office every day, you don't need as much office space and you can do things like desk sharing and things like that. Also, remote first is a great model to be competitive in the market when you're recruiting and retaining talent. It's also important because you're not location dependent in the talent that you can recruit. So when I worked at the software company, it was really important for us at the rate that we were scaling. We needed a lot of talent that was not easily accessible in our local market. So we had to be able to recruit from outside of the Wisconsin market. And it was a lot easier to find that talent that we needed because we were not then having to convince them to move to us. We could meet them where they were at. So it's definitely a strategic competitive advantage. Also, there's a lot of reports out there that show that if you give your employees the choice of where to work, where they're the most productive and can hit their results in the best, most effective way, that will increase your company's productivity as well as your employee engagement. So in summary, how this wave of a remote work happened is not the ideal way to introduce or scale remote work at your organization. And no, I do not believe that all companies are going to become completely remote as a result of what's going on. But I do believe that most will adopt remote first principles, and that's going to help companies with their recruitment, their retention, their employee engagement, their productivity, and it will help if something like this happens again or other life situations where your team has to quickly become completely remote, that transition can happen effortlessly. So I'm now going to hand it over to Ben, who is going to talk to us more about the how-to of remote work.
All right. Thank you, Leah Rowe, very much. And I can tell you, Leah is tapping the surface of the knowledge that she carries with remote work and developing a remote first strategy. In combination with a remote first strategy, we have to look at how to enable remote collaboration. So one of the largest barriers to remote working is the technology we use. So I want to talk a little bit about how do we do that. But before I go into how to do that, let's talk about where we are today and what we've seen happen with technology in the last couple of weeks. So there's been an explosion of remote working, obviously, with stay at home safe from state to state. But we have to remember that this is not just the United States. This is global at this point. So technology has become a backbone for a lot of organizations and how we function. And I want to look at the consumer market for a minute, because that's the tip of the iceberg. When we start looking at how technology scales for remote work, and especially in this kind of pandemic that we're experiencing, we have seen record numbers of new heights for what technology can bring for people. And we look at like digital subscriptions specifically, and who's streaming more, and what's the technology doing, and how does it scale. And I have a couple numbers on the screen. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but needless to say, with everyone moving to a home presence, we're seeing technology scale and the cloud scale. So we've all heard about what does cloud mean? And how does cloud really help my business to scale? We are living an existing model of how cloud can enable scaling for any services that we have. So if we look at our business technology industry now, we also see the collaboration platform scaling. So when we talk about how do I collaborate with my team, we look at tools like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Zoom, you're in a Zoom webinar right now. Everyone, there's been an explosion of Zoom, and everyone's been part of some kind of video conferencing meeting online these days, where it's either GoToMeeting, Zoom, WebEx, whatever the case. We've all experienced this. But there's Google Meets, there's Cisco WebEx, there's lots of different tools out there. But the explosion in these tools and these services serves up to what technology can enable for this type of explosion. And a couple of these numbers are on the screen too. We saw Microsoft is up 775%. That's not a mistake. They're literally up 700+% for their use of their collaboration platform. Zoom went from 50,000 downloads per day to 2 million. Google Meets exceeded their growth by 60%. Cisco WebEx grew 22 times over since the beginning of all of this, since January. And I think Zoom actually posted numbers this morning. Their top meeting day was, as of in 2019, was 10 million meetings in one day. As of the end of March, they have surpassed 200 million meetings per day. So just the global scale of these services and what they're bringing to bear is amazing for technology companies. But beyond that, how is technology helping to enable these organizations, and what are they doing to move us forward? They're responding, one, by proving that technology can scale. The cloud can scale. Nobody will ever question cloud scalability after what we are experiencing today. But then technology companies are taking it a step further. Zoom, for example, all schools K through 12 are offered services for free. And actually, these are old numbers. There are over 90,000 school districts now that are using Zoom for online classes for free. Microsoft is giving any organization 6 months free for Office 365. Now, there's different license levels of Office 365, and we can help determine what license level that is, but it's 6 months free to enable organizations to get started now and worry about what it costs later. We need to get people to a collaborative point and move organizations forward. Zoom and Slack. Slack is another collaboration platform that is very similar to Microsoft Teams. They're offering free consultation and webinars on a daily basis, almost hourly at this point, to bring people knowledge and use cases on how to use these tools and services. So some of the challenges with technology. Obviously, Leah touched on some of the challenges and some of the benefits as well of remote first strategies. But the challenges in the technology side are twofold. One from an employee, from an end user perspective, and the other one from a control perspective. And I know Mark is going to get on here in a little while and talk about security controls. But real briefly, the availability of company-owned devices. So not every organization, Eric talked a little bit about how SVA Consulting was really positioned to take on remote work. I've been a remote employee for SVA Consulting for 6 years. On my desk, I have 2 laptops, 2 big screens, a camera, I have my phone, I have a tablet. I am well set up for remote work. Most people are not. And in fact, in a lot of ways, people don't even have laptops. They go to work and they have a desktop computer that they log into and they work. They can't pick that up and take it home. This is one of the challenges of becoming suddenly a remote only or remote working force. Usually there's a strategy to this. There's development of policies and practices like Leah was talking about. In this case, how do we get people up and functional as quickly as possible? Most people have a phone of some kind. A lot of people have a tablet of some kind. People have personal laptops, personal workstations. A lot of kids can loan Chromebooks or school devices that can be used with remote tools. Remote tools that we're talking about today, like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, are not dependent on specifically organizational hardware. Okay, it's about enabling the tools for the organization. Now, there are security concerns that come with that, and Mark will talk a little bit more about that. But for the most part, we're talking about how do you enable your team to use the tools? Okay, they need a device. But then we also look at, when we present these tools, we're solving the problems for people to have the ability to chat, discuss, socialize. And we talked about how important and critical it is to socialize with people and to have that human-to-human interaction. That's where innovation happens. So having the ability to get people together to collaborate on documents, or be able to walk into a conference room and brainstorm on a whiteboard, the whole concept of I'm going to throw something against the wall and see if it sticks was born out of war rooms and being able to jump into a conference room with your team. We don't have that ability today. But what we do have are tools that enable us to create a whiteboard scenario or a group scenario where we can do brainstorming, where we can start throwing stuff against the wall and we can talk about it. And we can have that video interaction through these tools that allows us to see and to interpret and to play off of each other like we do so well in rooms. That's where innovation's born, and that's where we need to retain that capability. And of course, with this, we have to provide security for our devices. We have to provide security for our data and our applications. And we need tools that allow us to provide that security. Now more than ever in today's world, security is a concern for our data. And when we start looking at a remote first strategy, how do we secure our data? How do we secure our applications? And I know Zoom has been in the headlines these days for some of their practices, and we're going to talk about that. And Mark is going to point us to a URL that's going to be sent out after the webinar that's going to point out what the FBI is suggesting for Zoom and how to secure Zoom more effectively. We are all learning together with these tools under this kind of scale. So it's a little unprecedented. So the tools that we use, and I say we as Microsoft Consulting, SVA Consulting, we use Microsoft tools. So SVA Consulting is a Microsoft Cloud partner. So one of the tools we use is Microsoft Teams, and that enables us to have chat, to have our group conversations, to have ad hoc video calls. If I feel a need to talk to Eric, I'll ping him with a chat and say, hey, you got 5 minutes to talk? We'll jump on a video call real quick and we'll go through whatever it is I want to go through. But we can also schedule team meetings with up to, I want to say it's like 200 people. We can have a whiteboard scenario where multiple people can draw on the whiteboard and we can share ideas with that. And that comes in really handy when we have like a tablet or a cell phone, because then you can just use your finger and you can whiteboard on it. This isn't a computer-driven technology, it's a device-driven technology. So it's really flexible and agile in how we want to use that tool. The other part that Microsoft Teams brings to bear that we use heavily is file storage and the sharing and collaboration capability. So a lot of organizations might use tools like Box or Dropbox, even SharePoint Online. Google Docs is another example of these tools that are cloud-based, secure formats to share and collaborate on documents. And we are like every other organization. We want to be able to collaborate on our documents. So we store everything in Microsoft Teams. So we have a Teams organization that allows us to store whatever documents we want, whether they're Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Adobe PDF documents, Visio diagrams, really any kind of document that we want to store, we're able to store it out in Teams. The other tool that we use, and you're looking at that tool right now, you're in it, is Zoom. We have recently migrated to Zoom. We started that process not that long ago. We were actually using WebEx. That's what it's already gone. We were using WebEx for many years, and we ultimately moved to Zoom for a friendlier experience with the tool and the platform. And today we use Zoom in really innovative ways. And actually, for an organization, we were well positioned to go remote. but we weren't all the way there. You know, as Eric mentioned, there's still some back-end office things that we're still trying to figure out. But we also look at how we provide services for our clients in some cases. And one of those is training. Usually when we do training for any kind of mobile devices, it was very hard, and we would do that training in person. And then doing remote training for a mobile device on a mobile device is extremely difficult. But what Zoom has enabled us to do is using the mobile Zoom app, we're able to actually share our screen of our phone or our tablet, and we can train on applications that we're supporting, like an ERP or Microsoft Teams or some other tool. We can show it right on the phone, and we can walk people through in a training remotely. So it's enabled us to think through how we provide our services to our clients and how we deliver services that are vital today for all of our clients, for us included. So how can SVA Consulting help? Certainly as a Microsoft partner, we can assist in the Office 365 subscription. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft right now is offering 6 months free for Office 365 for almost any organization. There are some specific pieces that we would have to look at. If you're a government agency or you have some other kind of pieces there, we might have to look at how we get that 6 months free. But we can assist in creating your subscription and working with you to get the right subscription. We can assist you in setting up teams, getting the configuration, getting the deployment, getting teams out to your team, to your employees, making sure that they have the tools on the devices that they need so they can quickly get working. We can provide quick start guides to teams. These might come in the form of PDFs, they might come in the form of quick videos. We can certainly point you to other tools like Microsoft videos that they provided. We have some self-guided training videos that we can provide. We can certainly point to Microsoft's training videos as well. We can also perform remote training. So we do remote training through Zoom for really any number of people per class, and we can determine what that training looks like fit for purpose for your organization. You know, it's interesting in how we have previously rolled out this type of tool. Collaboration platforms usually fly under the radar for a lot of organizations. They weren't really mainstream business practices when you have your entire organization in an office. You don't necessarily need them because you can walk to an office, you can walk down the hall, you can walk and talk to people, you have email. There wasn't a lot of need for video conferencing to your own employees. That's all changed today, and it's changed how we train on these products. So there used to be a philosophy around you needed to drive a hard adoption practice. What I mean by that is you really needed to work with organizations to develop the policies and procedures and how they use the tools to make sure they were using the tools, to convince people almost to use the tools. Today, that's not a problem. Today, it's more about how do we get the tools out to them fast enough so they can use those tools effectively, okay? And with the kinds of distractions we have, we need to be able to get over the curve. And what I mean by that is get people to a comfortable place in using this technology. You know, I used to use this term when I was in racing. It was slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You do something slowly long enough and it becomes very smooth and it becomes a habit. It becomes very easy. It's like muscle memory. And then you can do it faster and faster and faster and faster. Using technology is no different for an organization. Everything slows down when you introduce new technology until everyone gets comfortable and can use it effectively, and then everything speeds up. Well, in this case, we're all forced into a very unique situation where we need to go fast pretty rapidly. So we need to have not only the tools, but an effective strategy to get the tools in the people's hands so they can use it the right way. And that's where we can help as well. With that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Mark to talk us through some security around today's evolutionary practices.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm going to try and really hard not to make this a doom and gloom session after the great pep talk you just heard from these two, but there is some changes going on in the security world. We've taken all of our stuff and moved it outside of the office. So let's talk about the problems first, and then we'll talk through some solutions. Working from home has opened opportunities for the bad guys. They have a door in that they've never had before. We're seeing attacks go up. We're seeing attack vectors change. We're seeing the list of home routers that are exposed on the dark web. That list has exploded as the bad guys are trying to get in on these things now that they have some meaning. We're seeing phishing on the rise. We're seeing a lot of phishing is fake emails for those of you that don't know, but we're also seeing a lot of smishing, and smishing may be a new term for you. Smishing is when you get a text that says, hey, this is the CDC, please subscribe here. That happens, and you click on the link and suddenly somebody's on your phone that you really didn't want on your phone. So we're seeing phishing and smishing start to rise. My wife received an email from the CDC that said, hey, we've got new numbers, please come and see them and click here. It wasn't an email from the CDC, it was a phish. It was a threat actor trying to drive people to their site so that they could harvest credentials. We've seen emails explode around cures or treatments, or if you have someone you know, click here to find out how you can help them. So the phishing and the smishing is going up by large amounts. I don't have the numbers, but it's significant amounts. And they're trying to get people to change their behavior based on a social issue. Quite honestly, we've got devices now that are in the corporate world that are being used for business that as of 2 weeks ago were not. They were home devices. They were the tablets that Ben talked about. These things are out there and suddenly they're forced into a business use. And not every business is ready for that endpoint or that device. There's places where we've had to just make stuff work. You get home, you can't work, you call the IT help desk and you say, I don't have access to this application from home. Make it work. And so people are trying their best to make everybody productive. And sometimes the way to make it work is just simply say, let's just take away the rules from that particular access and let these people do their job. Well, that opens up another place, another vulnerability, another place that bad threat actors can come in and do their work. A lot of our tools have lost their effectiveness. I've had one client that uses a behavior-based tool. What this tool does is it sits on the network and it says, oh, Mark Schaefer never uses YouTube. Why is suddenly Mark Schaefer going to YouTube every 3 minutes? It says, hey, that behavior has changed. This is something we should look at. And it does that so we can find new threats as they get in the environment. Why is that action changing? These tools are breaking because suddenly there's no Mark Schaefers on the network. There's just all remote users. So the tools can't correlate between what a person is doing that's normal and what a person is doing that's not normal. The tools just are breaking. We can't patch the endpoints. If we have a PC in our office that we have a patch policy on and suddenly we don't have that PC, we lose that control. And patching is the biggest way to avoid security issues, but we've lost that effectiveness. And then there's the weird ones, right? If you're in healthcare, did you know Alexa is HIPAA compliant? Amazon was more than happy to sign a BAA with you. Google Assistant is not. If you have a Google Assistant in your room and you're in a HIPAA compliant business, it's probably not okay. It probably should be shut off or moved out of that room. What do you do with printed pages? At work, you've got a bin. You can throw them in the bin, they get shredded, whatever. How do you do that at home? How do you make sure that that stuff is destroyed and not in somebody's trash or out in the breeze somewhere floating around for the neighbors to pick up? So let's talk about some solutions. Let's make this solution focused. How do you deal with all this stuff? How do you deal with all these weirdness, the changes? Maximize communications. Make sure your end users know the people that are home understand that smishing is out there. If you've never heard of it before, it might be a good idea to let everybody know what it is and that it's a problem. Phishing's on the rise. If you do an awareness program around phishing, do some awareness training right now. Let people know this is happening. You need to be aware. The environment doesn't mean the rules have changed. It means think about what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about password sharing on a home device. I was called over to a friend and she was communicating, her husband is forward deployed, and she was communicating to him through her laptop, and her laptop quit working. So I remoted in and took a look around and said, oh my, I see you have a teenage son. He's going places that are putting really bad things on your laptop. We've lost the control of that device. If you're sharing a device, set up your own account and put a password on it so that your teenage son doesn't put bad things on your computer that's causing you to have trouble with your work. If you're using a VPN, if you're connecting via virtual private network, if you have end users that are coming in, that are connecting directly in, you need to make sure that endpoint is still patched. It's still got antivirus on it. There's a lot of ways to do this. Some of them are more crude than others, but simply making sure people are patching their PCs helps a lot. If you're using a virtual desktop, do you have a rule in place to scan it before it attaches? If you're using remote desktop connection, you should probably know there's been a 600% rise in RDP connections that are not founded. So what that means is the bad people have a list of PCs that are out there that are listening for connections, and they're trying to connect. If your password strength isn't good enough, the bad guys are trying to break right into your desktops right now using remote desktop connections. So make sure your password rules are good. Make sure you're watching for people that are not authenticating. We had one client that had 40,000 login attempts against an account. That's not a human being. That's some bad guy trying to break in. Make sure you're looking for that stuff. If you give new access, if you have this just make it work, make sure you document it. And then try to go back afterwards and fix it, right? We're gonna have this, we're gonna know we have it, but make a list so you know what you have to fix as we go through this pandemic. And make sure you test and verify anything you do to fix. Evaluate your tools. They may need updates. You may need to change the way you use the tools. Patching tools may or may not be able to reach endpoints anymore. Your behavioral-based tools may not work. You may have to put a manual process in place to have people go check their antivirus every day. If so, do so. And then if it's at all possible, increase your monitoring. See if you can find out what's going on in your network that's not supposed to be there. Manage your endpoints. I think I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times, but those are really the entryway that has changed into the environment. Make sure those things are managed and you're doing everything you can to protect your computer network. When you have these risks, like I said, document them, keep a list, prioritize, and then make sure you are fixing things that you broke to get everybody up and running. Find the biggest risks, find the biggest concerns in your environment, and fix those first. If you haven't done so already, get your PCs, your laptops, your tablets, your phones encrypted. That'll protect them in case they're lost. And make sure your passwords are strong. Make sure people are using them. Make sure you're not on a home PC with no password. And make sure they're not shared by everybody in the family. It doesn't have to be a teenage boy. It can honestly be anyone that's out doing something on a site that's not good that can bring that bad stuff back onto the PC. So make sure you're protecting the home PC or the end user device from the rest of the family. With that, I'm going to turn this back to Leah. I think she's got some great tips for how we go forward.
Thank you so much. Okay, I want to end our content today with some tips for remote leadership. So tip number 1 is eliminate presenteeism. So I want us to eliminate this from our mindsets and also from our organizational cultures. So we need to shift. We can no longer think that employees sitting at desks equals doing good work. And likewise, we can't think just because we can't physically see our employees, it must mean that they're not working. So that means for us as leaders, we need to work a little bit differently. And honestly, I think a little bit harder, because it is much easier to associate success with something that is very objective, as they show up on time, they're at their desk, so they must be doing good work. They must be a successful employee. We need to get better at defining clearer milestones for success. We need to be more proactive in our communication and our collaboration. And we have to work on strengthening that trust so that we can trust our teams to be productive and to hit the results when we can't physically see them, and also trust that they will come to us and ask for help when they need it, because we cannot physically see them struggling if we're not always in the same space. Tip number 2, use video. We talked about that a little bit today, and it is absolutely crucial. Human connection is crucial when you're working remotely. So using things like Zoom, like Microsoft Teams. I love, that Ben talked about that they'll just jump on a random video call. That's fantastic. Any conversation that you would have had in person or via phone, do it on video. I always like to tell teams, when you're working remotely, default to getting on video with each other. Also, having the tools is only half of the battle. It's using the tools in the right way that is the other half. So just because you have video software, it doesn't mean anything unless you turn your screen on. So I always like to tell organizations, default to having your screens on. And if you're working or if you're working in a remote first environment or wanting to create one remote first, again, you'll have an office and you have people working remotely. So not everyone will physically be in the same space. And so to really have an effective remote first culture, I always like to tell everyone to live by this. When one person's remote, everyone's remote. So if you have 6 people who are in a meeting, 5 of them are in the office that day and 1 person's working from home, that means that all 5 of those people in the office would find somewhere in the office to be on their own computers, on their own screens. Because I'm sure you've experienced, like I have before, when you're the only person who's remote on a meeting and you're looking into a conference room full of people and there's side conversations going on, you can't quite see what they're talking about, somebody's whiteboarding, you're not sure what it is, there's apparently handouts, you didn't get a handout, it's not productive, it's not useful. So if one person's remote, make sure everyone in the meeting is remote. Tip number 3, practice asynchronous communication. Continuous communication and continuing to move work along is very important when you're working in a remote environment, especially what we're working through right now, where people have shifted their work schedules based on, for example, kids being at home. So some people are working earlier in the morning than they used to. Some people are working later in the night than they used to. And so people are working in different schedules. So it's really important that you use tools that will allow for async communication, and also that you have a communication plan. So these are the tools we're using. This is how we're using them. This is how we will communicate during this time. My favorite way for async communication is to use video recordings. I find these to be the most efficient, and also it promotes that connection, that face-to-face connection that is so important for remote teams in general, but especially right now in this socially distant world that we find ourselves in. So I like to respond to emails with video. For me, I can record a 30-second video way faster than it'll take me, 10 minutes to write the email. And also my team and my clients really appreciate getting that face-to-face, even though their face isn't there, connection. And so I definitely recommend that. Also, it's a great way to, if you're moving work along, for example, my staff, they'll send me something and I'll review it and I'll record myself on Zoom and I'll share my screen and say, this looks great, this looks great, I would change this here, I would think about adding this. So it's much more efficient, much more productive to do it that way. Tip number 4. Become paperless. It is much easier to thrive in a remote environment and on a remote team if you're not dependent upon paper. And for a lot of companies I've worked with to become paperless, I always say start with the mindset shift of believe that it is possible. Believe that it is possible that you can become paperless. But this is where the tools that you use and security are extremely important. And as you become more paperless, make sure you're focusing on documenting those new processes, because the processes will change based on the removal of paper. So make sure you're documenting those new processes and keeping them up to date. And my last tip, last but certainly not least, is adopt a growth mindset. Having a growth mindset means that you believe that you can grow and develop over time, you personally and your company. You are not fixed, you are not stuck. It means that you shift your perspective and you look at challenges differently. So you look at challenges as opportunities for learning and growth. So with embracing remote work, creating more of a remote work culture, allow yourself to believe that it's possible. Know that it's going to be a learning process, continuously learning. Make sure you're getting feedback from your team on what's working, what's not working, and make sure you take action based upon that feedback. Implement the changes, allow your company to evolve. And know that having a growth mindset and scaling remote work at your organization, it is not always easy, but I always like to say, when it comes to running a company, there's very little that actually is easy. So this is just a new challenge, a new opportunity, and it will require strategic planning, commitment, persistence, creativity, an open mind, a continuous feedback loop, and taking action, but it is absolutely worth it. So those are my 5 tips for leading a remote team. And now I want to pass it back to Eric, who will lead us in our Q&A or closing statements.
Fantastic. So yeah, thank you, Leah. So as we move into questions, you should have a chat area on your screen or a button that says chat, which will allow you to type your question and subsequently enter the queue. When you type the question, choose the all panelists option, and we'll see if we have any questions. Otherwise, we'll continue to move forward. Give everybody a couple minutes to find the button. And we had a question. What tool do you use, easy for me to say, to respond to Outlook emails using video? Ben, would you like to jump in?
Sure, I can absolutely do that. One of the tools that I use, and I have actually done this, so I'm glad Leah brought it up. I use Zoom to record, so we can record any Zoom meeting that you want. It's very straightforward. You can record out to the cloud. You can record down to your own workstation, to your C drive. You can do a quick recording, and then you can just attach that to an email and send it on the way. Better yet, if you have a collaboration platform like Teams or Slack or some other tool where chat and group discussions are available, you can do a recording directly in that, or you can attach that video there as well, and you're decluttering your inbox as well at that point.
Perfect. Thank you, Ben. Leah, I think you're probably best suited here. What techniques can employees use to overcome resistance by employers who do not want employees to work remotely?
That is tough. And let me just say, there is no one right answer for that. It is really hard to have a remote first culture or embracing it. So my recommendation first would be have your leadership talk with me so I can explain all the pros and benefits of becoming a remote first workforce. But I think that it really, my suggestion would be, especially with the benefits and the opportunities that come with remote work, I would have a conversation. I would set up a time to have a conversation about what's going on, the pros that you see for your company and the opportunities that you see. There's tons of content being published right now on how remote work is going to be shifting. So I'd really start with having a conversation, because company leaders who were against remote work a couple of months ago might be shifting their own mindsets, and it's really a good time for companies to come back together and have a discussion.
Perfect. It probably lends well, and maybe your firm actually has some, Leah, but question came through, are there any tools or resources for designing a remote first workspace? Yes,
I'm actually going to be putting out some videos today and tomorrow, and blog articles specifically on that. So if you can either email me at leah@choosetheperk.com or go to our website, choosetheperk.com, and we'll be putting that stuff up today.
Awesome, fantastic. Question, and I'm not sure if I know the answer, Ben or Leah, on Zoom, they've been trying out the free version, and it does not have sound on PowerPoints. Curious if the paid version allows sound to be broadcast within a PowerPoint.
I honestly have not tried to do that. From a technology perspective, if you have a PowerPoint, you're displaying that, the sound should carry through your laptop or your machine. I can certainly look into it and get back to it. I don't know, Lee, if you have another answer, you use it as well, but I can look into it.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Leah just went muted. I'm not sure if the system did that or she did that, but in any event, we'll look into that. And I think it looks like Brian, we've got your contact information. We can circle back with you. All right. Fantastic. It looks like, all right, we'll circle back with you, Brian, and it looks like that might wrap us up on questions. That being said, we've got a couple additional slides here. Oh, there we go. Sorry. The next installment in our webinar series will be next Tuesday, and we'll address the questions you have regarding the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, as well as the CARES Act, and that'll be led by our CPA group. Next, additional resources and recordings can be found on our COVID webpage, which is seen here, and you can go to sva.com or svacpa.com, svaconsulting.com, and find the link to that consistent webpage. With that, I would truly like to thank all of you for taking time to join us this afternoon. Thank you to our presenters and the team that helped put this together. I hope you found value to yourself and your business as we tried to keep this broad and understand that obviously everyone's situation is different. We have included our contact information here as well as in the follow-up email you will receive if you would like to follow up with any of us with questions related to your specific situation. While this webinar focused on attempting to stabilize within the consulting business, we're also working on additional sessions for this overarching series, one related to what the new normal, quote unquote, may look like, and also how to be ready to move quickly as we emerge from this, and then another on how to be prepared for it. So thanks again for your time, and be well.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.